everybody. Join Josiah Middaugh for a quick walkthrough of the TrainingPeaks dashboard. He'll show you how to read your fitness trends, understand key metrics like CTL, ATL, and TSB, and use your data to guide smarter training and recovery.
Great, thank you, Sophia. Well, great, this is kind of a deep dive, we'll say a medium dive, shallow dive, into the TrainingPeaks dashboard. And most of you should be able to see this calendar. This is the first view that you see, especially from the desktop. So I'm working off the desktop. Also, if you do turn your phone sideways in that landscape mode, this calendar will pop up and it'll look a little bit more like this. So here's just one example of a calendar. This is someone who is super compliant, completing all the workouts, and you may be starting to wonder, what do all these numbers mean? So you see some of the things on the right side of the screen: fitness, fatigue, fitness or chronic training load, acute training load, and you'll see all the durations. Some of it might be really intuitive, like the duration that you spent running or swimming or biking, but a lot of TrainingPeaks, a lot of these metrics are based on a simple concept called training stress score. And so it's a way of quantifying how hard a workout is on your body. So first let's talk about just the color coding of the dashboard or this calendar. So when you're in that calendar view on a desktop, it'll look like this, and you will see the color code green for anything that is completed. So if we look at the meaning of the different colors, green means that you completed it as planned, that you're close to 100% compliant. And really, it's just if you're within 20% of the planned duration, that's why it turns green. If it turns yellow, then you're outside of that 20%, and so you did a little bit less than 20% of the planned workout. And then it turns orange. They kind of look about the same. The yellow and orange are very similar, but orange would be that you completed more than 20% of the planned duration. And as far as our perspective, the coach's perspective, if it is turning green, yellow, orange, like you are compliant, you are doing the workout, but that yellow and orange just means you're outside that 20%. And then the red, that just means nothing is logged. And if you're someone who waits a couple days to upload a device, then things will be red even though you completed it until you connect your Garmin or Apple Watch to the app. So that's it in a nutshell. And then here's a calendar view of someone that has kind of a mix of all of those colors. I would say this person is very compliant, but you see the yellow, you see the orange, you see a couple reds. They completely missed 2 days of workouts, but they completed all of the rest. And so for someone who's uploading a device, this happens automatically. The watch or whatever device you're using will pair that workout with whatever's planned as long as it's the same mode. Now, sometimes you'll see something turn red even though you completed the workout, but if it was, say, for a bike workout, but you selected something slightly different on your watch, like a mountain bike, then it might show up as a separate workout, and so the planned workout would be red, and then your other workout will log. Or if it was, say, an indoor cardio workout, but you did an outdoor run, that'll show up as a run, and it will look like it doesn't pair. You could click and drag and pair those workouts. But again, not a huge deal from the coach's perspective. We want those things turning green or orange or yellow when you can, but we can still see that the workout was completed. Okay, so now to the meat and potatoes of how TrainingPeaks quantifies training load. So training load is taking into account the duration of the workout and the intensity. So it's a metric that tries to quantify that and how stressful that is on your body. So if you think of a 1 hour workout, if you did a 1 hour workout at 100% of your threshold, that would be a score of about 100. So it's all based on a 1 hour at a certain intensity. If you did 30 minutes at 100% of threshold, it would be about a score of 50. So it's a weighted metric, so it's not exact, but it's basically that duration times the intensity, and it's really specific to you. So it could be calculating based on power, if you have power zones on the bike. And that's the reason that a lot of it is described with power, is this metric was originally developed for cyclists, where every workout had a power file and is based on power. But TrainingPeaks can calculate it based on heart rate, or it can do it based on pace. So everybody has their heart rate threshold entered in TrainingPeaks, and you may or may not have your running pace or your bike power entered into TrainingPeaks. And so this number is only as good as the zones that are entered in TrainingPeaks. And I will say as a disclaimer, probably 2/3 of people could completely disregard a lot of these metrics, because we can see if you're doing the workout, if you're not doing the workout, and you get a pretty good idea of your load. But this is for that data-driven person, athlete, that is completing everything and they are logging everything on their device, and they have a metric, either GPS with speed on the run or heart rate for bike or run, or maybe even power on the bike. Same with swim, it will do a swim TSS. And if you do a strength workout and you start and stop and have a heart rate file, it'll do a TSS for that too. So it can do it all based on heart rate. And if you're logging everything, then it starts to become kind of cool and you see what some of these metrics mean. So everything's based on that TSS. It does heavily weight volume. So if you went out for a 2-hour ride and you were, say, at 50% intensity, which would be in a zone 1, it would give you a similar score. That score would be pretty close to 100 for a 2-hour ride at 50% as it would be for a 1-hour ride at 100%. And so if you do a little bit more, say, you go out for a hike for 3 or 4 hours, it's going to give you a huge TSS. And you say, well, wait, my gym intervals were way harder than that. And that's where it's not really an exact science. It does really weight the volume a little bit more. And so all the rest of the metrics are based on that single session training stress score. The CTL that you see, it's also called fitness in TrainingPeaks. If you look to the right of the calendar, it's called fitness, but that's your chronic training load. And so it's a 42-day running average of your TSS. And then the ATL, the acute training load, that's also called fatigue. The fatigue is a 7-day TSS. And then the training stress balance, that TSB, this is also called form, if we look to the right of the calendar. But your form is the difference in your CTL and your ATL. So if you had a slightly lighter week than your last 6 weeks, that would turn into a positive number, and that would mean that your readiness is up and maybe you're a little bit tapered, you're resting for an event, or you had a couple days off, then your form will go up. But then if your form goes up for a period of time, then your fitness goes down, because then that 42-day running average, that 6-week average of your TSS will start to go down a little bit. So let's look at what this means for a single workout. Here's a 4-mile zone 2 run. And you see the planned duration, 45 minutes, the completed duration, 41 minutes. This is calculating a TSS, and that little r right there means that it's based on running pace. And you can see that the TSS that was planned was a 52. That person completed that 4 miles a little faster than planned. They had a little higher intensity, and so that number is 58. So they get a score of 58 for that TSS for that single workout. Now let's look at another workout. This is a bike workout. You see it's a little bit longer. This is based on the 1 hour. It has a little bit higher TSS, 78. And it doesn't mean that that was way more intense. It means that they held that intensity for longer. And so you see this IF stands for intensity factor. The simple way I think of it is the duration times the intensity factor is roughly that TSS. And you see it's not exact. If it was exact, the TSS here would be 88 if the intensity factor is 0.88. And let's look at a third workout. This is where I say it's not an exact science, because this is a really hard workout. This is someone going hard and easy for 30 seconds at a time. This should be a higher TSS, and it's an hour 10. I would say this should be a way higher training load than that hour, pretty easy workout. But you see that TSS is 61. And their average heart rate for this workout was a little bit lower. It was at 0.68. And so they had a lot of recovery, they had a lot of cool down, and they went hard, they went easy. But those zone 4, zone 5 workouts, it's kind of frustrating that it comes out as a little bit lower TSS. So that's why it's not an exact science. If we were all training at the same intensity all the time, then it would be pretty exact, but it's not. So this is kind of big picture stuff. You can kind of see how these things change over time. So here's a big overview. This is the performance management chart. And for everybody that has that premium edition of TrainingPeaks, you should be able to go into this. If you have a good amount of time, at least 6 weeks training, then you could get that chronic training load, that CTL, and that's also called your fitness. That's this blue shaded area is that CTL. That's the 6-week running average. So let's go to the basics. So these red dots, every red dot is a workout. So each workout is given a TSS, and here's the TSS scale here on the left. And so these really high TSS numbers, that's probably from a very long workout, or it's a day where somebody did 2 or maybe even 3 workouts in the same day, and those stack each other, and you get a really high single TSS. And these red dots that are on the very bottom, that means that there was no workout completed on those days. So those would be essentially off days. And so you see that this for this person over these durations, this chronic training load, it builds and builds and builds as they start to do a little bit more and they start to build up that fitness. So it correlates with your overall fitness. And then the acute training load, this is also called fatigue. This is that 1 week or the 7-day average. And so you see that kind of go up and down, up and down. And then the yellow is the form. So it's the difference with those. And it's not that you always want a negative or always want a positive number. You want that to undulate a little bit. But if you were getting ready for an event, you wouldn't want to have a super low form reading. That means that you were training, the last 7 days you were training really hard. And it's way more than your average. And that's when you get a really negative number. But if you're backing off, taking a day off, maybe taking 3 or 4 days light, then you'll start to see this form start to climb. And so an athlete that uses this all the time, they might know that, okay, I don't need a really high training stress balance, that form number, but I don't want a -20. Maybe I'm okay if it's -10 or at 0 or maybe a slightly positive number. And so that's how you can see over the course of several months, you can see this person gradually built their fitness. They had a couple breaks in training here. Maybe there was travel, maybe there's illness, maybe there's injury, or maybe they did an event and had a couple days off. And so you see these breaks here, but you see overall, they're building that fitness, they're building that training load over time. And then here's another representation of the chart. And all I did here was click on one of those red dots. So you can see on February 15th, this person did a 30-mile ride, pretty late at night, must have been indoors. But you can see that little red dot, correlated with a certain TSS, and that's just one blip on the schedule. So this is from January 1st all the way to June. So this is a 6-month period of someone's, all of these metrics plotted out. And that's in that performance management chart. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a pretty short overview of it, but that's that TSS in a nutshell, and that's what some of those metrics mean. If we look to that far right side of your calendar, you'll see, let's see, let me scroll over a little bit here. So each week you can see a fitness. So again, this is a 6-week average. You can see fatigue. This is acute training load. This is a 7-day average. And then you can see a form. That's the training stress balance. So this person, their last 6-week average was 104. Their last 7 days was 110. So this person is progressing the training load. And that can be one way for a coach to decide how much more to give a person. Maybe that planned ATL, that 7-day average, is maybe 10% more than their 6-week average. So then we're able to load and progress somebody in a kind of a logical, progressive manner. And then that form is just the balance of those two. And then if you click on any given workout, you can see a TSS. Actually, you don't need to click on it. You can see here, you see the different values here for the TSS for the different types of workouts. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you guys. And again, not something that everybody needs to be well versed in, and maybe it won't make sense if you are mostly using TrainingPeaks for your strength training and maybe you're not uploading a device every time. Then it probably is a metric that you can disregard. But there it is, the performance management chart, TSS, and all those other 3-letter words that you see on the TrainingPeaks screen. So thanks for listening.